Queen, and we are going to talk about the Carmelo Anthony indictment. So, if you haven't already subscribed, please go ahead and do that. Hit that button because it's free and it doesn't cost anything. And I apologize, I am hot as heck right now. My AC's out in my house, so I'm a sweaty mess. So I apologize. But anyway, so whew, there we go. That's not attractive, but I don't really care at this point. Um, so let's talk about this. So today, Carmelo Anthony was officially indicted in the death of Austin Metcalf. Now, those of you who do not know what I'm talking about, and I don't know how you don't, because this thing is always being talked about. Back in April of this year, there was a track meet in Frisco, Texas. A student from another school went under the tent of a different school, and a student from that school went up to this kid and said, "Get the heck out." There were some words. What the exact words are goes back and forth about touch me and find out, whatnot. But to make a long story short, one kid shoved another kid, and the other kid grabbed a knife out of his bag and stabbed one kid in the heart, and he died. The kid who died was Austin Metcalf. The kid who did the stabbing was Karmelo Anthony. Now, when that happened, Karmelo Anthony has been stating that this was a case of self-defense, that he was being bullied, and it was self-defense. Based on the indictment that went out today, I don't believe prosecutors believe that, but only time will tell. Video has come out, but it's very from a distance, and it's kind of hard to say from what I'm seeing what the whole story is. But the grand jury obviously felt there was enough evidence to push for felony murder. Now, let's talk about these charges, because Texas does not have murder in the first degree. They just don't have it. They have different types of classifications of things, but first degree murder is not one of them. Hello. But murder in Texas is a first degree felony. So he's being charged with a first degree felony. And let's see, I got people popping up. Hi, everybody. So murder in Texas is first degree felony. So that means it carries a potential sentence of anywhere from 5 to 99 years, or life in prison and a fine of up to $10,000. So there's that. And then you have capital murder, which is a separate charge. That involves the intentional killing of another person under specific aggravating circumstances, such as a killing of a police officer, or during the commission of another felony. So there's that as well. This is the one I think what's going to come into play for Carmelo Anthony. Sudden passion can reduce the charge. If the defendant can prove they caused death under the immediate influence of such from an adequate cause, the charge can be reduced to a second degree felony. So that's what I think is going to happen. I think that falls in line with his self-defense case, because right now people are arguing about whether or not he had a knife or it was a cleat sharpener in his bag. Now, police keep saying knife. I'm going to lean towards knife, but who knows? And unfortunately, I mean, today I commented on a thread of somebody talking about this indictment, and I've had people coming after me because of what I said. I just said it's a knife. He brought it on school grounds. He shouldn't have done that. So let's go over a couple of things. First, the stadium where all this went down, somebody had stated that this was public property. Anybody could be there, wasn't school property. That's incorrect. The stadium was built for the Independent School District of Frisco. So it's their football stadium, but they do allow the community to use it for other events. But it is the school stadium, so it is school property. Then we go back and forth about cleat sharpener, knife. I believe it was a knife. Everyone keeps saying, everybody in law enforcement keeps saying knife, so I believe it was a knife. And then there's a fact that they keep saying that Austin was bullying Karmelo. They never knew each other. Okay, so let's get into this. So here's my thing. You've got two young men who made very poor decisions. And I've got this woman, this person, Trahina Harrington, saying that it does not matter about school property, keep your hands to yourself. Okay, and that's a fair assessment there. But if someone puts hands on you, do you think it's equally fair to stab them and kill them? It was not a proportionate response. Let me say why. They weren't beating this kid down within an inch of his life. He wasn't bleeding out. They didn't have a weapon. Him stabbing him was going too far. The two brothers may have been known for being bullies, but Karmelo did not know these kids. So let's go back. The brother who died had no business going over to Karmelo in the first place. Let me just say that. Hello. But Karmelo had no business stabbing said kid. I mean, let's just be clear here. It does matter, because if you put your hands on somebody and you stab them, you're still going down for murder. You're causing intentional harm. Now it comes down to, when it comes to Karmelo here, they charged him with a first degree felony, which means they've seen the video footage, they've seen everything. So, they felt appropriate to charge him with a first degree felony. I do feel it's going to get knocked down to a second degree where he has less time, because I do think the crime of passion aspect comes into play. He felt afraid. I mean, I don't think he had the intent to kill the kid. I think he got the weapon out and just went too far, because like I said, these boys on either side, their families are affected forever. What if it was my child? Let me tell you this. I said this in my Facebook thing. I got this person asking me all these questions. If it was my child doing the stabbing, I'd be like, what the hell are you doing? My kids were bullied. My kids are black. So this is not a race thing for me. My kids are black, and that they have dealt with nonsense in school. They're adults now, but they dealt with nonsense in school. My oldest child is autistic. He got bullied constantly. So I would never approve of them stabbing somebody unless that person had a weapon. You do not know until the situation comes up. Let me tell you this. I do know. My son had his life threatened when he was in school by a gang member because he saw the gang member do something they shouldn't have done. And my son reported it. Okay, we're not talking about race. Okay, let's take race out of the equation. I'm fine with that. Right is right, wrong is wrong. Okay. Again, because those boys walked up on him, he had no business stabbing that kid. Simple as that. Now, Karmelo, I don't think he's a bad person. I think he made an unfortunate choice. And one person's never coming back, and the other one's probably going to jail for a long time. There is 2 against 1, right? I do understand that. But again, this boy, they did not beat him down. They didn't punch him. They didn't try to choke him out. They didn't do any type of severe, any bodily damage to him. That would be like me being afraid of somebody walking up to me and shoving me in the shoulder and then me stabbing them. you know. But like I said, let's get back to it. Carmelo is going to have to live with the fact that he ended someone's life. That's what it comes down to. No, I'm not condoning wrongdoing. All I'm condoning is that punishment should fit the crime. If those boys did in fact bully him, they didn't deserve to be stabbed, but other things should have happened, but not that. Nobody deserved to die over this. That's my point. Because like I said, Carmelo ended someone's life. Whether it was because he was being bullied, he had fear, whatever, he ended someone's life. So he is going to have to live with that fact for the rest of his life. Again, I don't think, Austin should have walked up on him either. However, because they walked up on him does not mean that boy deserved to die. So, like I said, Carmelo is going to have to deal with that for the rest of his life. He's going to have to acknowledge that he ended someone's life and face that fact for the rest of his life. Austin Metcalf's family is going to have to deal with the fact that their son's never coming home. Simple as that. I don't think Carmelo's a bad person. Again, I just think he made an unfortunate decision, and I think Austin Metcalf and his brother made an unfortunate decision. I get that. I've had people walk up on me and threaten me, and I felt fear, but I wasn't going to stab them. That's my point. You can feel fear, you can feel uncomfortable, but does that mean you need to be stabbing people? And if they were known to be bullies, then the school needs to be held accountable for not keeping them in check, and their parents. But again, because of the fact that Carmelo had no history with these kids and did not know them, why did he bring a weapon to the track? He didn't know these guys. Why did he do it? Right, I'm not against anybody defending themselves. They don't need to be stabbing people. So let's just say that. I mean, like I said, I've had people walk up to me, but I don't go around stabbing people. I mean, defend yourself, but you don't need to go to that extreme. Now, of course, if they had a weapon, let's just say Austin Metcalf had a weapon or his brother had a weapon, then then you've got some more justification there. But they had no weapon, so why go stabby stab? That's what I want to know. So, like I said, the parents are very God fearing people, but you can still have asshole kids. But let's be clear, that happens. You can teach your kids right from wrong, but once they get to an age of understanding, they make their own choices. I mean, my kids, I had talked about it with them. And my daughter even said, Mom, most people are carrying a weapon these days, most kids, most teenagers, young adults. So I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that. And I asked her why. And she said, because the threat of violence is real no matter where you go. And I get that. I completely get that. But does it constitute killing someone? And that's the argument here, because he is trying to justify what he did by saying it was self-defense. He's trying to say that he felt in fear, that he felt in danger of his own life, and that's why he did what he did. I don't think he's going to be able to prove that. But a sudden act of passion, I think that can be proven. And therefore, he will not go to jail for 30 years. He might get a much lesser charge. Hey, everybody. So more people are joining. Right. So, I mean, this is no different than anybody committing a crime. Like you run a stop sign and you hit a dog, or you rob a bank, these type of things. I mean, you break the law, you must pay the consequences. Okay. So if you, okay, so you're saying you never said he should not face charges. Okay, what do you feel should happen in the situation? I'm curious, Trahina. I am curious. What is your opinion? Do you think he should face murder, or what do you think should happen? Because personally, I think it should be pled down to that sudden passion, the second degree situation. Because that, for me, fits the situation better. And he has a shot of actually having a life. Okay, and I can agree with that. So Shahina just said that she feels that everything needs to be thoroughly investigated. And that's true. Everything should be thoroughly investigated. And that should be the case. That should be that way for every case, whether it's a robbery, murder, kidnapping, whatever. Let's see. Kit Kat says he made some very, very poor choices, but he made that choice to stab an unarmed individual. And there we go. Oh my goodness. I am so sorry, Drahina. Your 16-year-old was murdered. Wow. Okay. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm very sorry to hear that. Um, all three of my children are still alive, so I could not even imagine losing a child like that. I could not. So I am so sorry. Um, so yeah, like I said, the case needs to be thoroughly investigated. I don't believe this is going to get to court for some time, at least a year or two. And because at the end of the day, you teach your kids right from wrong. And when you let them out in that world, you pray to God that they retained that knowledge. But you could be a good person and still make a bad choice. It happens. Oh no, you're fine, Trihina. Um, like I said, this is an open forum. I like people to have a active dialogue if they can, because I'm just giving my opinion and how I see things. It's just my opinion. Everybody has a right to their opinion. And this is a very controversial situation here because, you've got black person murdering white person. They're teenagers, they're in Texas. I mean, there's just so much going on with this. And, Austin Metcalf's father came out saying that he can't believe they allowed Carmelo Anthony to graduate. I don't see a problem with that. You know, um, Kid earned his education. Let him have his diploma. You know, I think demanding he's not allowed to graduate is kind of petty in the grand scheme of things. But all yours is black on black. Okay. But race really needs to come out of this whole situation because it seems like a lot of people are trying to make it about race and it wasn't about race. I don't believe it was. I just think you had a bunch of arrogant young men who got all high on themselves and made some really bad choices. That's what it comes down to for me. But like I said, at the end of the day, two families are affected lifelong. Austin is never coming back. And Carmelo has to live with the fact that he ended someone's life. And that's the thing. And if it was my kid who did the killing, I would be upset. I'm not gonna lie. And after I got past the whole you've been raised better than this, you know, and if it was my child that was taken out, I would want a thorough investigation as to what happened. And the whole thing is a tragedy. No, like I said, nobody wins in this. Because here's the thing: even if Carmelo Anthony goes to prison over this, nobody wins. You know why? Because Austin is still not coming home. Doesn't matter how much time Carmelo does in jail, Austin's not coming home. So nobody wins. The Anthony family loses Carmelo. The Metcalfs have lost Austin permanently, but the Anthonys at least have a shot of getting Carmelo back. And when I was watching coverage for the Iowa 4 murder, that Brian Conenberger dude, they had asked one of the parents of one of the girls that was killed. Oh wow, they gave him 100 years. That's crazy. That's hey, if that's what it was called for, that's what it was called for. But they the parents said, I would love my daughter to have gone to prison. And they were like confused by the statement. And they said, because if she's in prison, she's at least alive. We can still call her, we can still talk to her. There's nothing we can do. So, like I said, the Metcalfs have completely lost Austin. The Anthonys still have a shot to be involved with Carmelo. And at the end of the day, nobody wins. Carmelo goes to prison. Austin is still dead. I don't know. Okay, Kit Kat asks, what about all the money his family spent on cars, etc.? I wonder about that family's ethics. From what I understand, they really have not received that money to do all of that. Now, they did have to move. They were getting threats. I understand that completely because they have other children they have to protect. And I am not, even if they use some of that money to do that, I'm not opposed to that because you need to keep yourself safe, you know. Um, but the cars that I think that was a rumor. I don't think that was ever actually proven. Um, so that one I can't really speak to that too much. So I am concerned for the family about the Next Action Network guy speaking for them because I don't think he's a good person. He's got a lot of criminal history, especially with child abuse and theft and fraud and whatnot. So yeah, I don't know about that guy. I don't know about that guy. So they need to get rid of him. They need to get somebody else to speak on their behalf because it's definitely not that guy. Oh God. Well, anyway, I'm gonna hop off here because I have no air conditioning in my house. It is like 90 some degrees, and I have a sinus infection on top of all this, so I feel like crap. But I wanted to get on here because, like I said, on Facebook, I was getting called out in the thread because I had made a comment about the knife, and people didn't like what I had to say, which I didn't say anything crazy. I was just speaking fact. But and yes, and it's all. I agree with you, Kit Kat is all an unfortunate situation. Oh, thank you, Tricky. Thank you so much. Um, so again, everybody, thank you so much for popping on. If you have not already subscribed to the channel, please do so. It's free, it doesn't cost anything. And when I talk about missing person cases, this helps get that algorithm out there because somebody might see something and they didn't realize they saw something and could speak on it. So again, comment, like, share, subscribe, and have a great night. As I always say, yes, Kit Kat, hope to see you soon too. I always say, be weird, be rude, be safe, because if you're weird and rude, they won't take you, I guarantee it. So be careful, everyone. Bye.